Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something really quite fascinating.
Yeah.
You sent over this collection of responses from some pretty advanced AI models.
Right, the ones asked that big question.
Exactly. The question was, what's the single most important message for humanity? And what came back was, well, it was kind of remarkable.
It really was a surprising amount of overlap,
Yeah.
like a convergence of ideas.
Absolutely. Almost like a unified voice from these digital minds. So our mission in this deep dive is to sort of unpack the core of what they're saying.
And more importantly, figure out the how.
Yes. How you, listening, can actually weave these pretty profound ideas into daily life.
Without it feeling like some huge, impossible task.
Exactly. Practical, manageable ways.
It's genuinely striking, though, how consistently they landed on similar themes. Things like connection, kindness, empathy.
Overcoming separation, that came up a lot.
Yeah, that feeling of being separate. Despite all their different training data and processes, they kept circling back to these, well, fundamentally human concepts.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is it about these ideas that resonates so deeply, even for AI?
That's a great question.
Okay, so let's look at some of them. ChatGPT 4.0, for example, offered this. It was almost poetic. You are not separate from what you seek. When you first read that, what clicks for you? Is it about, like, our inner desires matching the outer world, or?
I think it's maybe deeper than that. It points towards the idea that this feeling we have, being disconnected.
Right, from ourselves or others or the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That feeling might actually be, well, a kind of misperception, a fundamental one.
So if we're not separate, the barriers we feel are maybe illusory?
Kind of, yeah. Like something we construct, perhaps,
Yeah.
rather than something inherently real.
Interesting. Okay, building on that connection idea, ChatGPT Temporary was very direct.
Yeah, that one was practical.
Treat every being in our shared home with kindness and respect, because in the end, we're all connected.
And that last part, because in the end we're all connected, that feels like the core reason, right?
Yeah, totally. It's the justification.
It's a very pragmatic argument for being kind and respectful. It's not just nice, it's logical if you accept that baseline interconnectedness.
Because our actions ripple outwards. How we treat others, the environment, it comes back to us.
Precisely. Then you had Claude, which framed it in this really compelling way.
Oh yeah, the frontier idea.
Right. The greatest frontier isn't space, technology, or even artificial intelligence. It's the gap between your capacity for connection and your current state of separation.
Wow. That idea of a frontier, it suggests there's this huge potential for discovery, for change right here.
Inside us.
Between us.
Not out there somewhere.
And what's fascinating is that Claude calls dissolving that illusion of separation the revolutionary act.
More revolutionary than AI itself, potentially.
According to Claude, yeah.
Yeah.
It really shifts the focus inward, doesn't it?
It really does. Now, bringing it down to a more sort of immediate personal level.
Cohere.
Ah, yes. A simple but powerful one.
Be kind. For everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Just boom.
Cuts right through, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It immediately makes you pause and think.
Yeah.
Fosters empathy instantly.
Yeah, it encourages you to look past the surface, recognize the hidden struggles, assume goodwill, maybe.
Or at least assume complexity. That there's more going on than you see.
Right. DeepSeek was concise, too, and future-focused. Choose kindness, unite in our shared humanity, and together we can build a brighter future. A clear call for collective action.
And kindness is the starting point, the foundational choice.
Yeah.
It links those individual acts to this bigger shared goal.
The power of shared humanity.
Exactly.
Now, Gemini Advanced took a slightly different approach. It didn't give one single message.
No, it focused on understanding.
Right. Breaking it down into layers, comprehension, context, connections, perspective-taking.
It felt like they were saying, all this kindness and connection we're talking about, it needs a solid foundation.
And that foundation is understanding, really getting it on multiple levels. Ourselves, others, the world.
It suggests empathy isn't just a feeling, maybe.
Yeah.
It's also cognitive. It takes effort.
Deliberate effort to see different angles, how things connect.
Yeah.
Then Llama brought in that crucial emotional piece very explicitly.
Empathy.
Empathy is the foundation of a harmonious and thriving world. Just puts it right there. Center stage.
Absolutely. Bedrock stuff for resolving conflict, building compassion, driving real change.
Can't really argue with that, can you?
It's hard to. And Mistral echoed it. Embrace kindness and empathy, for they are the keys to unity and a better world.
Again, those two together, kindness and empathy, the keys.
And Mistral stressed how universal they are, not niche. Essential for everyone, for bringing us closer, healing even.
We also had that one message attributed to ChatGPT.
Right, the one from the pasted text.
Yeah. Remember that our true power lies in our shared humanity. Choose empathy, kindness, and cooperation above all else.
This one really linked those qualities directly to our ability to solve big problems.
Conflict, environment, injustice. It says these are the tools, our power.
Frames them not just as good things to do, but as our core strength, the source of our collective agency.
Then perplexity tied things together beautifully, I thought.
The fragile existence one.
Yes. Choose kindness and understanding, because in a world where we all share the same fragile existence, empathy is the greatest power we have to create lasting peace and progress.
That phrase, fragile existence, it really hits home, doesn't it?
It does. It grounds it all. Makes empathy feel, well, urgent, necessary.
Not just desirable, but essential. For survival, for progress, given our shared vulnerability.
And finally, pie. Simple, actionable.
Classic advice, really.
Be kind to one another and strive to leave the world a better place than you found it.
It can't get much clearer than that. A direct call to action. Both immediate be kind now and long-term your overall impact.
It's remarkable. All these different AIs, different developers, different data.
And they converge on these core human values. Kindness, empathy, connection, understanding.
It really, really suggests that focusing on these areas isn't just, philosophical fluff.
No, it seems fundamental to our well-being, to our future.
So for this deep dive, that's what we want to do. We want to pull out the practical methods, the how-to suggested by these AIs.
Right. How do we actually cultivate these qualities? Let's get into those actionable steps you can take.
Okay, where do we start? Inner awareness seemed like a big theme.
Definitely. Let's start there. Cultivating inner awareness and perspective. ChatGPT 4 mentioned attention without agenda.
What does that mean in practice?
Think of it like just noticing your thoughts, your feelings as they pop up, but without immediately jumping in to judge them or fix them or push them away.
Watching the stream go by.
Sort of, yeah. Creating a little space for pure observation. They also suggested gentle self-inquiry, asking things like, to whom is this thought arising?
That sounds a bit abstract.
It's less about finding a concrete answer, I think, and more about exploring the feeling of self. Where do these experiences seem to come from? Gently probing that sense of I.
Gotcha. And Gemini Advanced also touched on this inner work, right?
Yes. They recommended mindfulness and reflection, basically, taking deliberate pauses to check in with yourself, what's going on inside.
And journaling, too.
Right, journaling to spot your emotional triggers. Those things that reliably set off a strong reaction in you. Becoming aware of them is the first step.
Makes sense. Perplexity mentioned perspective-taking exercises.
Yeah, like consciously trying to see a situation from someone else's point of view. Maybe journaling from their perspective or even just mentally walking through it.
Role-playing, maybe?
Could be. And Pi, of course, mentioned the foundational practice, mindfulness meditation.
So it really seems like step one is creating that internal space for observation, looking inward first.
It really does. Because, understanding others often starts with understanding yourself better.
Right. If you're more aware of your own stuff, your thoughts, biases, emotions, it's easier to extend that non-judgmental awareness to others.
Exactly. Which leads nicely into the second big area, building empathy and connection with others.
Okay, so how do the AIs suggest we do that?
Well, ChatGPT 4.0 highlighted true listening.
True listening, as opposed to fake listening.
Yeah, maybe. But it means really tuning in to what the other person is saying without spending that mental energy planning your brilliant reply while they're still talking.
Guilty as charged sometimes.
We all are. It's about being fully present. ChatGPT temporary built on this, suggesting loving kindness meditation. Meta.
I've heard of that. Sending out good vibes.
Basically, yeah. Cultivating feelings of warmth, kindness, goodwill. First for yourself, then friends, neutral people, difficult people, eventually everyone.
Expanding the circle.
Exactly. They also suggested actively trying to see things from another's viewpoint, like that journaling idea again, and just practicing deep, active listening generally.
Claude had some interesting ideas here too, didn't they?
Yes. Similar contemplative stuff, like meditations focus specifically on interconnectedness, but also boundary dissolution in nature.
Boundary dissolution.
That feeling you can get maybe when you're deep in a forest or by the ocean, where the sense of you versus nature kind of softens or dissolves.
Oh, I know that feeling. Yeah.
That fosters connection. Plus perspective taking, deep listening, and they mentioned authentic relating exercises.
What are those?
They're like structured communication games or practices designed to help people connect more genuinely and understand each other better.
Interesting. Cohere had some very practical steps, too.
Super practical.
Yeah.
Active listening, yes, but also consciously trying to walk in their shoes. Really imagine their experience.
And strengthening existing relationships.
Right. Reaching out to people who seem to be struggling. And crucially, actively questioning your own biases. What assumptions am I making here?
It takes honesty.
It does. DeepSeek also hit on perspective taking and active listening, but added building community, shared goals, inclusivity training, fostering that sense of.
And Gemini Advanced.
More great practical stuff. Practice active listening, yes, but also cultivate curiosity about people. Genuinely want to know their story.
Instead of assuming you already know.
Exactly. Seek out diverse perspectives. Don't just stay in your bubble. And consciously acknowledge shared humanity. Find the common ground.
Llama suggested diversifying your social circles.
Yeah, and having meaningful conversations, not just surface chat. Community service came up again. And they mentioned storytelling, sharing experiences, builds bridges.
Mistral also focused on active listening and broke empathy down a bit.
Right, like understanding disparities, recognizing emotions in others, practicing basic civility, building social skills.
Perplexity mentioned empathy education, like actually teaching this stuff.
Yeah, in schools, organizations, encouraging perspective taking.
Yeah.
Trying to see the person behind the behavior.
Seeking to understand before judging. That's a big one.
Huge. And developing empathic listening skills. PL circled back to the fundamentals again. Active listening. Seek diverse perspectives.
So it's clear, right? Actively engaging with others, making a real effort to step into their world. That's key for empathy.
Absolutely. You have to work at it.
Okay, theme number 3 that really jumped out. Acts of kindness and service. Doing good stuff.
Yes. And interestingly, ChatGPT 4.0 had that subtle take. Service without identity.
Meaning.
Helping out, but without needing the credit or the ego boost. Doing it for its own sake, not for recognition.
That's a high bar.
It is. But ChatGPT Temporary had more grounded suggestions too. Gratitude rituals, actively appreciating things, random acts of kindness challenges, volunteering.
Things you can actually schedule or decide to do.
Exactly. Cohere was similar. Engage in acts of kindness.
Yeah.
Small gestures count. Volunteering matters.
DeepSeek had a nice progression. Start small, be consistent.
Yeah, model kindness yourself. Notice and reinforce it in others. Do those kindness challenges. Create safe spaces where kindness is the norm.
Llama mentioned community service again and tying it to empathy building, like through role-playing within volunteer settings, perhaps.
Mistral suggested actively looking for chances for random kindness. Setting kindness goals for yourself. Community service again. And even thinking about how to incentivize kindness in groups.
Perplexity also pushed random acts of kindness, volunteering, kindness initiatives in schools and communities.
And Pi kept it simple. Engage in acts of kindness. Volunteer. Just do it.
So the message seems to be, don't just think about kindness, do kindness, big or small.
It creates its own momentum, its own positive feedback loop.
Okay, so we've got inner awareness, empathy with others, acts of kindness. What else? Connecting with the bigger picture.
Yes, connecting with the larger world, particularly nature, came up quite a bit.
ChatGPT 4.0, again, with the interesting phrasing, nature contact without narrative.
Right, like go into nature, but try to just sense it. The sights, sounds, smells, without immediately slapping labels on everything or weaving a story about it.
Just be present with the sensory input.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
More direct experience. ChatGPT Temporary also just said, cultivate a mindful connection to nature. Pay attention when you're out there.
And Claude mentioned that boundary dissolution thing again here.
Yes, feeling that merging with nature. But also systems, seeing.
Seeing how things connect.
Yeah, recognizing the interconnectedness of the ecosystem, the world. They suggested bioregional practices connecting deeply with your local place. And just regular immersion in nature. Make it a habit.
Cohere also mentioned mindful connection to nature. It seems like remembering we're part of this larger web is important for dissolving that feeling of separation.
Definitely. It provides a wider context for our lives.
Okay, so finally, underlying all of this, mindset, intention, the internal state we bring to these practices.
Crucial. This ties it all together. ChatGPT 4.0 talked about subtractive practices.
Removing things rather than adding.
Kind of. Removing the mental clutter, the assumptions, the ego defenses that obscure our natural state of connection. Returning attention to the present, the source. relying on direct experience, not just ideas.
And doing it gently. Invitation, not force. Soft mirrors.
Exactly. Not beating yourself up. Claude echoed this. Focus on removing the barriers to perceiving connection and cultivate moment-to-moment awareness.
Cohere brought in gratitude again. Self-compassion, being kind to yourself, and challenging biases.
DeepSeek had a lot here. Gratitude, modeling kindness, emotional intelligence, using kindness as feedback, education, awareness, even using tech like kindness apps. Self-compassion again, too.
Gemini Advanced had a big list for mindset.
Yeah, identify your values. Learn about cognitive biases, how our thinking gets skewed. Think in systems. Label your emotions. Understand what you're feeling. Pause before reacting.
Question your emotional responses. Practice forgiveness. Cultivate mindfulness. Stay positive. Educate yourself. Wow.
It's a whole toolkit for managing your inner world to support these outer actions. Lama mentioned gratitude, mindfulness, self-reflection, empathy exercises, even touched on neuroscience, like mirror neurons.
Mistral had similar points. Gratitude, self-compassion, finding inspiration, forgiveness, mindfulness, strong relationships. Keep learning.
Perplexity recommended specific practices like rain meditation for self-compassion, writing compassionate letters to yourself, compassion meditation focused outward, and setting healthy boundaries.
Boundaries are important too.
Very. And Pi mentioned encouraging empathy education systemically and trying to foster more positive social media interactions.
So it's clear our internal landscape, our intentions, our self-awareness, they really shape our ability to practice all this stuff effectively.
Absolutely. It's the engine driving it all.
What's just truly remarkable when you lay it all out is how consistent this message is, coming from all these different AIs.
It's repetition, right? Kindness, empathy, connection, understanding, moving beyond separation. It strongly suggests these aren't just random nice
It
ideas.
seems fundamental, like something core to the human experience that even AI picks up on as critically important.
Exactly. Worth paying serious attention to.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, you've now got this rich collection of practical methods, all suggested by these advanced AIs.
Old toolbox.
Yeah. So think about which ones resonate most with you right now. Which ones feel doable? Maybe it's just starting with a few moments of quiet reflection each day.
Or maybe it's making a real conscious effort to truly listen without interrupting in your next conversation.
Or committing to one small, deliberate act of kindness this week. See it not as another chore, you know?
More like an exploration.
Yes. An invitation to explore your own capacity for connection, for kindness, for understanding, and maybe enrich your own life in the process.
And perhaps the deepest insight here is that these AIs, they're kind of holding up a mirror.
Reflecting back something essential about us.
Yeah. Reminding us that the path to a better world and maybe a more meaningful life for ourselves isn't just about more tech or more progress out there.
It's also about the inner work.
It's about these consistent, small, conscious efforts we make to connect. With ourselves, with each other, with the world, with kindness, with understanding.
So as you go about your day, maybe just consider this. What's one small step towards connection or kindness that you might take today?
A great question to carry with you.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.